from a Tampa supporter. We appreciate that. Guys, if you don't know, this is David Heath to my left or right. He owns Lock and Load Publishing, and my name is Keith Tracton. I'm the lead designer developer on the World at War series, and Storming the Gap is the first volume in that series, which you guys know because that's why you're here. And we really appreciate all your support. It's pretty amazing. You guys are amazing.
Yes,
you make this happen. We don't make this happen. You guys make this happen.
All right. Can any of you guys hear us? Mo says no. We're trying to make sure that we're doing this right.
All right, and I'm not seeing any responses other than.
Well, I see. It looks like it's locked out. And the only thing you do when you click on a name, does it say you want to ban it?
Oh, here's Harry Coins. Yes, click the speaker in the upper left of the screen. There we go.
What?
Stream opens. I wonder if this stream opening muted is like, when you do Google Chats and it opens muted and you're like, why can't I hear anybody?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Thank you, Alan. Alan Tormey says his stream open muted. Just clicked on the speaker icon and the sound came in. Maybe that guy's having the same problem. Yeah, it's sounding like something there. Oh, good. Alan's hearing us. Good. Tom's hearing us. Nice to meet you guys. Appreciate all your support and comments.
I don't see any speaker.
Are you on the chat tab?
I'm on the chat tab. Yeah, I am.
And I have 6 messages on the chat tab. So, sorry guys, it's the first time we've done this, so we're sort of working out the kinks here. But if you do have a question, just shoot one. And while Dave's looking up the technical stuff, I'll be happy to answer anything I can.
Hey, Alan, whoever's. Oh, here, I see something. No, that's your quality of control.
Right.
Okay, I don't see anything where I have a speaker, but I can hear you. I don't know if they can hear us.
Tom says they can hear us loud. Can you hear both of us, Tom?
Hey, Tom, can you hear us?
The campaign system. There's a question.
I don't even see questions. How are you doing it?
I'm on the chat tab. There's a chat tab on the right. There's me on the left, you in the middle, and the chat tab on the right.
Okay, apparently I was recording the wrong thing. Okay, this is showing me the status.
Yeah, and I'm just using your chat names here. So, and Delmira says he can hear us both.
Okay,
which is great.
All right, guys.
So yeah.
I'll let well, we got 4 questions that were submitted. Okay. Or we can start with the guys who are actually here asking the questions.
Yeah, well, actually, the 2 of the questions are the same as Delmira's question here, which is talking about the campaign system. The campaign system, think of it as an alternative scenario generator. But the campaign, the Drive to Gießen, and it is Gießen, not Glisten. I apologize for that. We were in the draft mode and we fixed it.
And that was my fault, guys. I took the wrong file.
Gießen's northwest of Frankfurt, and there's generally two fast paths on the Fulda Gap. There's a northern and a southern, and the northern, I grant you, there were some comments, is not the fastest route to Frankfurt, but given the volume of Soviet troops we would think be coming down both paths, we kind of allow for that. So the battle ends up happening there. This particular campaign. It's actually where the Fulda Gap scenario takes them. Gießen is just north of that. But as far as the campaign system, it's a box-to-box system. And the idea is that the HQs that you will have in the game are already companies and battalions. So you'll basically build a force. I was talking with Jeff Schulte, the lead playtester, and he said it's roughly up to you can do up to a brigade with NATO, but you may not want to, and possibly up to a division with the Soviets in terms of these HQ markers. And that you'd use the ones provided with the game. And then we have a very simple 2-player reconnaissance system because you're going to have enough reconnaissance assets that you're going to build a picture of what the other guy has. But because it's slightly random, as anybody knows who worked with Intel, you can have from nothing to, yeah, there's troops there. We don't really know what kinds, specific types, etc. And so that's you're just going to know where he is, but he may not be there by the time you get there. It's a box-to-box system. If anybody's played the old game Soldier King, you'll recognize the boxes and the roads. The roads between the boxes have a maximum capacity in terms of formations. Anything that arrives in the box with an enemy gets to fight the scenario, and there's specific guidelines. There are guidelines for how to set up a scenario, how to put objectives on both sides of the map and in the middle of the map, so it's a semi-fair scenario. Where to enter the map. Every map is a 2-map scenario, so there's plenty of room to maneuver on the map itself. And the idea is you play out the scenario. Anything that didn't quite make it or is over the road capacity arrives as a reinforcement on turn 4. And it's a very easy way of generating scenarios. I mean, you don't really have to use the campaign. You could actually just say, all right, well, we're going to set up a scenario here. I've got 2 companies and you've got a couple battalions. And use it as a way to quick set up a scenario too, if you don't want to worry about points or anything. But there'll be a little bit of stuff, like there'll be some airstrikes. I already mentioned there'll be recon. And the idea is basically for the Soviet player over the 3 days of the campaign to get as far as he can across the map and take as many boxes as he can. There are, let's see, there's one thing I wanted to say about that was, the turns are basically, there's an early morning, a late morning, an early afternoon, a late afternoon, and late, I guess it's more like late evening. So there's 4 turns a day plus a possible night turn, because the night turn's for maintenance. But you can launch, either side can launch a night attack and use the night rules. So you can have a night scenario if you want in that case. So it's light, it's flexible, but we think it'll give you some fun and just trying to put some scenarios together, or just use it as is and let it generate scenarios and see how far you get. That's sort of the lowdown on the campaign system. Let's see. If anybody has any more questions, just put them in the chat box and we can expand on any details you want. And thank you for questions about that, because it looks pretty cool. Jeff Schulte's the mover and shaker behind that one. So he put that out there and we're like, wow, that's pretty cool. And we hope you guys think so too. Solo play. How does solo play compare to the rest? I tell you, I know I posted the thing where I was basically testing the solo system again, because I just keep playing it. Playing the game relaxes me, and it handed me my butt. You got to have an AI that fights, because if you don't have an AI that fights, for me, it's like I'll make the decisions myself. I mean, anybody who plays solitaire, you can always make the decision for the enemy formations. That's why we say that the World War 85 series is solo friendly, because to start with, you have a deck of formation cards, which includes a random events card, a battlefield events card, and includes the end turn card. So you never know when the turn's going to end, even when you're playing 2-player, and you never know which formation's going to turn up, even when you're playing 2-player. So if you're satisfied with, stepping into the other person's shoes, say, all right, I'm playing the US, and then the Soviet battalion comes up and you kind of change your perspective, that's fine. But if you want a little more detail, that's where the solo comes in, and it'll guide you in a finer way. It's not going to cover absolutely everything. There's going to come points where you're just simply going to have to make a choice for the AI. And my thing has always been, I make the choice where it's like, where's the AI going to do the most damage? Simple things like, when I was playing one of the solitaire scenarios, if you guys happen to caught the pictures, I was playing against the West Germans. They were the David's automatic enemy, AEO.
Artificial enemy opponent.
Artificial, yeah, that's sort of just kind of adopted that term because it's easy.
It's like 2 systems. We've been working on them. The AE one is obviously from Academy Games, from their solitaire system. It's also what we modified for the Lock and Load Tactical. I don't know if you guys can see. Let me just see how to do this right. See any of these cards? Yeah. Okay, so if you guys are familiar with the Lock and Load Tactical one, it's based off of that so far. We have tried Josh Hostile cards. I think I have them up here if I don't show myself. Yeah. And we're looking at 2 of them. The object, believe it or not, will be, this is Josh's system. Okay. Centralize this a little bit.
Right.
So, okay. Josh's system, it works. We're not sure which one we're gonna be the final one yet, but it's been very, very challenging with both, I would say.
Yes, absolutely.
But they are being modified. It was something that we only agreed to after Keith and I, struggled to make sure it would be working well. And so we got basically all of our staff down here in my office to sit down and play. And I will say that it did very well. I was kind of surprised it did as well as it did.
Yeah, I was definitely not happy that it beat me, but then I thought, I guess it kind of has to.
Yeah.
And truth to be told, I am you want to play me in a tournament because I'm the designer, so there's so many versions of these rules running through my head. As my lead playtester who has to know the rules always points out to me, Keith, that's not the rule, because I'm remembering 3b4. But at any rate, as far as the solitaire went, there was a point where the West Germans, and I forget I forget which system it was, but the West Germans got to fire their off-board artillery. And so they pulled a card to see, did they do that? Say, yes, they did. And then it's like, well, where do you drop it? And if it doesn't say something like closest or farthest or some other indicator, you kind of have to look at the situation and say, well, what is it? Well, in this particular case, the West Germans were defending a town, and the Soviets were almost on top of them. I mean, we were literally in the adjacent hex and 2 hexes away, and we were close. And he had these 2 rounds of artillery delivered mines, which are they're sort of new. They were in the old game, but they were a fixed pattern that you do. And here, one of the things about artillery delivered mines and also smoke is they are in a flexible pattern now. You'll get 3 counters of smoke in most cases, or 3 counters of artillery delivered mines, and you simply put them, in a row or in a triangle or in something where, one marker touches at least one other marker, and you can see that there's a finite number of patterns, and there's a big diagram of it in the book to show you all the patterns you can do. But basically, you have the flexibility to put these things into patterns that are useful for you instead of being fixed on, well, it's going to be in a line all the time. And I looked at it from the West Germans' perspective, and I said, hey, this is sort of final protective fire. If I miss and it scatters, these mines are going to drop on my head, which is not good, because then you do roll an effect. So I basically dropped to encircle the city with mines. Not that the civilians would like it if there were any left, but I happened to roll, neither scattered. So I literally had a ring of mines around the city. Now, that doesn't make it invulnerable, but it does make you think twice about, crossing that minefield, on the first turn. And buying time is sort of the name of the game for that scenario. So you do get down to a point where, you may have to make a choice. My only advice is just don't sweat it. As long as you're having fun, make the fun choice. That's why I dropped it that way. It's like, that would be cool. Make the fun choice, and the rest of the thing, the rest of the system, whichever set of cards we used to test, it was always supportive of the fun choice in that way. And you'll get some unexpected results. There's a saying in the lock and load tactical cards that they won't play like you play. And that's, of course, sort of important, I think, for me from a concept standpoint. So yeah, these won't play like you play, but they will challenge you because they don't play like you play. And if you're playing solitaire, I would think you would want a challenge. So that's kind of so far on the solo module.
Well, a couple of things we should point out. If you're familiar with the lock and load tactical solo, there are no flowcharts. Okay, the game is obviously a lot easier to solitaire because half the reason for the flowcharts is you're trying to decide what squad to pick and what hacks to do to what. Because of the World of War 85 system, you get the formation. That formation gets activated. And so you just need to know how or where to attack or move or defend with that formation. You don't necessarily have to go through all the other gambit.
Right. And sort of one of the things that happens is that when you activate a formation, that's part of, I sense people's apprehension is, well, I've just activated, 10 Soviet platoons. What do I do with them? And the way we adopted it is that whichever card you pick, it has a series of priority orders on it, whichever deck we were using. And the idea is that you look at the individual units and see what actions for those individual units, and you apply the card to that unit because he might be the guy who has somebody in line of sight. He might not be the guy who has somebody in line of sight. He might be the attachment that's self-propelled artillery that's 7 hexes behind. They'll all have different situations, but if you just pick them as the focal point for the card, run down the same card for that formation for each unit, you'll find that you'll get some pretty realistic results. And it may not be what you play, but it definitely will be something worth shooting at.
Yeah.
One of the things that people do bring up all the time is, well, what about opportunity fire? My feeling is if the enemy unit has a shot, take the best shot. wait till they come close. If it's a difference between shooting at at effective range, which is half printed range in World War 85, for those who may not have read the rules that are available for download, versus point blank range, which is half rounded down of that printed, or excuse me, quarter rounded down of that. No, see, I don't get my rules right. The printed range is effective range. Half of that rounded down is the point blank range. You're going to treat it differently depending on what range it's at, and if it's opportunity fire and you're planning on moving closer, if it's the enemy guy, I'd consider, well, is that guy going to be worried about you being farther out and, still having a turn to move in, or is he going to let you move into point blank range and really let you have it? I think that's a reasonable decision for the player to make for the solo side, the side that you're playing against. I'm not sure we want to get down to the nitty gritty of that, but there may be a suggestion. It may say shoot at the farthest, shoot at the closest, and then it does take it off your hands. But sometimes it'll just say fire, and you kind of have to, make that an opportunity fire. Yeah, if you're going to charge him, see which ones he shoots at. I'll grant you, in a live game, there are people who will, they'll have bounding Overwatch. They'll only fire half their guys. Because they'll save the other half for another formation that might not have moved yet. You should feel perfectly, comfortable doing that if you think that's what the situation warrants. If you, want to make it easy on yourself, just either fire everybody or move everybody or whatever it is, so that everybody's ops complete. But the rules already state, it's if your ops complete, you're not going to be doing anything. But if you pick a formation card, everybody you take those ops complete markers off, and now everybody's available. If you only use half of them, they're going to be available for op fire, and that's the enemy against you. So there's a little bit of flexibility in that. But you should feel comfortable making those decisions down at that level, I think. Oh, hey, Kev.
Hey, other thing we should point out too, Locking the World at War 80, sorry, World at War 85 is a lot more user playable because of the activation. So I want to clear, just to make sure the record's clear, you don't necessarily need the solo cards to play. We provide them.
That's correct.
Because it adds a little bit more direction to what you're doing, and it may do something that you're mentally not thinking about doing because it's being played on the card. Also, the plan is, if this works right, is that you'll be able to use the same deck of cards for the Nations at War or for the World at War series. So you're basically going to be able to play with either or. Okay, but again, it's not as necessary as maybe it would be for Locking with Tactical.
I just saw Kev's comment. It's like, who is this developer design? Who is this guy?
I am Blackwell Hurd, and that is
Blackwell is our very talented layout guy. You guys have been seeing Blackwell's work when you download the rules. Blackwell, he takes my Word. If you can chicken scratch in Word, he takes that and he turns it into what you see. So,
what else we have here?
So let me check the Q&As that got submitted here. The Vassal module of World War 85 for Storming the Gap, will it be available to Kickstarter backers first before you upload it to the lock and load section on Vassal? I get to toss that one to Dave.
Okay, we are having that being put together right now. Okay, so I'm going to say that we will probably make it available to the Kickstarter people before it's available to everybody else. It's going to have a limited value because you're not going to have the scenarios to go with it. Okay, what I don't know we're going to use, Keith and I will need to discuss, is we might try to put 2 or 3 or provide 2 or 3 just so you can play, have a little bit more variation than the starter kit scenario. But yeah, it should be available actually long before the actual arrival of the game. It is something that we are doing right now.
All right. That's a physical question. So it says when Lock and Load published Line of Fire magazine, and that was back in the old days, lots of World of War players, which is the old series, sent in homebrewed scenarios. I know you use compendiums now for game updates and scenarios, and that would be for Nations at War has a compendium. Will you take in scenarios for possible inclusion to possible World at War compendiums? As I'm sure a lot of World at War players will be making their own after gaming this when it comes out. I kind of hope so. All that design your own stuff.
I would say,
for it.
As the publisher, I would love, not like love, to get scenarios from the gamers. Okay.
Yeah.
And
there's so many possibilities with this game.
It took us so long to do this because we really pre-planned how this was going to be executed. So take it as a yes. If you have scenarios, if you want to make a scenario, contact Keith, myself, put it in the forum. Just let us know. And we can make an upload area where people can upload the scenarios, and then we could put them together into some type of compendium or something else.
Yeah, because the scenarios, the one thing you guys should know is that there's a lot more counters in this game than are in the scenarios, because we went through and we have a formula we wanted to make sure everybody had, enough attachments that they could cross attach. For instance, there's a lot of cab guys out there, and it's like, we don't always have a pure tank battalion. It's like, yeah, I understand that. So there's ability to cross attach where you have a white banded unit that you can, an entire platoon of infantry, say, that you can swap into your, M1 battalion if that's what you want. And that way you can, or just swap a platoon in. You can have, your M1 company and cross attach. So you have a task force or a team or whatever it is that you want. The Soviets had that capability too, to a certain extent, because they tended, and somebody's going to tell me I'm wrong on this. That's okay. But the pattern that what we selected was that it seems that the Soviets would have a tank company to go with their infantry regiments, and that could get, infantry battalions, and that sometimes got used, sometimes didn't get used. But if you want to cross attach a different type of tank, we made those available. Everybody should have anti-tank guided missile weapons or anti-tank weapons of some sort. Everybody should have onboard artillery to some extent. It doesn't have to be a lot, because it has a big effect, because it's an onboard indirect fire is an action now, just like moving and firing. So if it's there, it can fire every activation, and that can be pretty potent. Offboard artillery still is, once per strike per game. Basically, you still have a track for that. But the combination of the two gives it a little more flexibility. And some people, they just want more artillery. So yeah, you can put in more offboard artillery, but now you have the ability to put in a little bit of onboard artillery. And not every scenario or nationality has the onboard artillery in the scenarios, because we kind of built the scenarios to be somewhat of the equivalent of the old game, but kind of updated. Kev has a message here, and I had the opportunity to play with Kev at BGG-Con to show him what we had, and thank you very much for playing, by the way. And he almost had that game. It literally went down to the last turn and the last card. It was like, he beat Jeff Schulte. He beat the playtester. I threw Jeff under the bus there. But again, it went to like the last turn. And that's the intensity that we think this is bringing to it. Is of the scenarios I played, 80-90% of them have gone down to the last turn or the second to last turn. I've had my butt handed to me on the first turn because I was careless about setup. So you can't be careless about setup, if I could tell you that. But one of the things that Kev had mentioned was that the scenario that we were playing, felt good, and I was really proud of that, because we'd kind of taken an old scenario that existed in the old game and updated it. Because the scenario was basically, you've got Soviet air assault, they're in a town. Now we've added transport helicopters, so you can actually air assault with your air assault, load them onto the transport helicopters. There's enough transport helicopters to move, an entire battalion of Soviet air assault. And whether you do that as 6 platoons or 9 platoons, that depends on your level of information as far as, the strength of those formations were at the time. We put in 9 just in case you just want to put the full thing in there, but I believe it was only 6 platoons, but in a company for that. I mean, can't even get it straight, in a battalion for them. But one of the things that happened in this one was Kev, I don't know whether you knew this or not, but we basically, it was the same scenario, but we put in the transport helicopters. So he had to actually bring those helicopters in, and you got a different kind of game, because now you have to plan for, well, how do I get these guys in? How do I drop them down? Where do I drop them down? And also, the game, what do you do with the helicopters afterwards? And these helicopters were annoying to me because he was using them against me. And you got helicopters is like, yeah, well, they can get to your anti-tank missile assets because they can fly. It was a whole different game and added a whole different dimension to it. And I had a lot of fun, by the way, Kev. So I just so you know. But that's what we want to bring to you guys. Part of me keeps having to remind myself during this Kickstarter that I have had so much fun with this game already, and the people who have played it, we want to get it out to you guys as quick as we can because we want you to be having that fun too.
I'm gonna.
I think that's.
I'm having Shane. Okay, grab one of the final proof boxes so we can show the customer some of the counter sheets and stuff. So hold on.
Oh, okay, great.
Upstairs, there's 3 boxes. Says Days of Hero on it. Just run upstairs and grab one of those boxes and we can show counters and over the 45, which somewhere upstairs on either the white table or on Darren's desk. Sorry, guys. Probably should have got that first. All right, so if we look at the chat stuff first, let's see. Frank Johnson, hello from Tampa. Thank you for supporting us. Harry. I can't see the name; it's too small. Myself.
Okay. Tom Alerts has a question he put up. Will the solo mod, and this is business, I get to throw this today. Will the solo module be an add-on if we don't reach the goal?
Yes, it will 100% be an add-on if it doesn't reach the goal. Don't worry about that. We got that covered. Hey, just so you know, when you get to one of these questions, Keith, you can click on it to show the audience the question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and then we can just answer it. Okay, so I'll see in the chat and let you handle the questions. The next guy in the chat, Alan, he's stream open muted. He can hear it fine now. Can you allow it, Tom? Could you talk about the campaign system? We handled that, I believe. If there's anything else we didn't cover, a specific question you have about the campaign, guys, just ask. Okay. If you guys are using Chrome, it seems Chrome is having a problem playing the audio. All the other browsers aren't. I don't know why that is. That's not us. That's something with Kickstarter
right.
Application. The solo module, yes, it will be again. Having an issue here. Okay, fix that.
Oh, M1A1. All right, I'm going to tell you guys a secret. I'm going to tell you guys a secret, and you have to swear to me not to tell anybody else because it's going to cause so much furor. In the full to gap scenario, we were adding counter sheets, and we deliberately made it because it's a large scenario. It's a large amount. We want you to have something to maneuver on that with. And we added hopefully enough companies and battalions to fill out a nice size force on each side. I say hopefully because the one thing I always do with counter sheets is I always go back to the spreadsheet and double check the spreadsheet. So I'm sort of obsessive. I do it more than once. I'm sort of in that cycle. So I'll be double checking again or triple checking or whatever I'm up to. But in there, we had a little bit of feedback. And one of the big deals about this is the M1 was just out in late 1984, 1985, and it just arrived in Europe. And yet people are always saying, well, what about the M1A1, which is a completely different beast because it just has a 120 millimeter gun versus the original M1's 105, which is the NATO 105. And
wait. To make call that around the office, it's Kev's tank.
Ted's tank?
No, Kev's tank.
Oh, Kev's tank. So the Kev 1A1. We are putting in 2 companies of M1A1s, so you'll have 6 counters that you can swap in wherever you want. We're not giving them any designation. We're not putting them in the scenario, but you can feel free to use them anywhere in the game because they will have their own formation cards. So they'll have they'll have some identity, but where you put them will be up to you. So don't come down on me too hard if those real world formation names on those formation cards don't quite fit that area. So I have to say, and Kev can attest to this, that there have been many major discussions about the capability of the M1s and the M1A1s and whether the M1A1 should be in Storming the Gap. And I'll be brutally honest with you guys. I had to keep the time frame to 1985 itself. And we had some wonderful people contribute some wonderful historical information. One guy, if I'm getting this right, was in 5th Corps, which was in the Fulda Gap, 5th U.S. Corps, on the command team during the transition of all this equipment, you know, M113s to M2s and M1s, M1A1s. And it spanned a 3-year period, if I'm reading the information that he very kindly provided. And it really needed to isolate it so that we could, you know, because the counter mix is that's what we basically had to do the scenarios. But when we get to the stretch goals, we're like, we can have a little more flexibility there. The M1, however, is a really good tank, no matter how you slice it. And people are like, well, it doesn't have the 120. It's like that 105. They're like, well, you know, it's a good gun, but the tank is a good tank. You have to fight it, though. And that's the thing I think people will probably need to get used to. You can't just sit on your hill and say, oh, my M1 can take on all comers. When you got 3 M1 platoons and he's got, you know, 10 T-80 platoons, you have to think about how to use your guys and survive, and how to use your guys if you do lose a platoon, that kind of a thing. That's what I call it. You have to fight it. You have to think about it. That's the nature of the game. I mean, if you didn't have to do that, it wouldn't be much of a game, I think. So I think you guys will like it. I really do. Everybody who's played it, and there have been a lot of people who played it who play the old game, and they're like, it feels good. It feels the same. Yet it's different because the way the values work has been reworked. We have an algorithm that we literally apply to every unit in the game. There is one minor exception, but as we add new unit type, and we have about 450 unit types on our master spreadsheet. Can't get to them in every game, or maybe even in every game in the series, but we have them available. But sometimes we run across stuff that people suggest that we just don't have. I mean, to be honest, I didn't have any 2S3s, which is the Soviet self-propelled artillery. We have 2S1s that you'll see in the game. Didn't have any 2S3s, and it came up in the Fulda Gap counter sheet. And Jeff Schulte again was riding herd on that, and he put in 2S3s, and I'm like, oh well, we need to make them then. So the spreadsheet allows us to do that, and very quickly too. So that you will see some 2S3s in the Fulda Gap counter sheets as well.
All right. We have one guy wanted to see. Now, remember, these are laser cut counters because they're our in-house counters. This should be a counter sheet of the admin counters. I don't remember who asked, but someone wanted to know if I could show roughly what the admin counter sheet looks like.
Right. Okay. And they're the same on both sides.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Right.
Yeah. Well, there was a reason that virtually all the markers are the same on both sides, except for things like smoke, which has smoke and smoke thinning on the opposite sides. EW, where it has EW on one side and EW reducing, but it's obviously an EW counter. But the markers are double-sided the same, because I find I end up, for whatever, whether it's beside the map or whether it's in a box accidentally, the markers all end up together. And if I have to flip a marker to identify it, it just takes me so much more time. And I think everybody's had the experience of you drop the box on the floor and everything got mixed up. I know it's weird, but that's kind of what I'm hedging against. These are the, by the way, these are the unit counters. This one is This is the West Germans. Yeah, this is the West Germans in the start of the Soviets. So there's a 10 Soviet T-80 platoons down there. It's a full battalion. The West Germans have a good mix of things. That's the front, so the color bands are solid there. And then, David, you show the back again? So the solid color bands mean that you're on your full strength side, and then the color band with the white stripe means that you're on your reduced strength side. And then anything that's only one step, in other words, it doesn't have a second step, you see the big black with the yellow print, says a one-step unit, you know it. You don't have to go fishing anywhere for that. So
I'll just go through the talking. So
yeah, that's the full Soviet sheet. The Soviets are long enough. I think they spread over 3 sheets. I think they're 3 sheets here.
Yeah, it looks like it's right here.
Right. There are
the alien sheet, the monster sheet. Hold on.
He's just pushing the button. Oh, by the way, these are the new East Germans. There were no East Germans in the old games that this was built from. This was built from the old Eisenbach Gap and the old Death of the First Panzer. We combined those two. We revamped them. We updated them. We made the maps geomorphic, that kind of thing, because they weren't originally. In fact, one of them needed the hex grid rotated. It just was in a different direction. But we added 6 new East German scenarios. I went to somebody who worked on the old system and had some very specific ideas about that. And he very kindly provided the concepts for these and you know, which maps they should use and counters and things. And then we took them and we ran them through development and, you know, basically made them into these scenarios. They tend to be the larger scenarios because we didn't have as many larger scenarios. While I'm on the topic of scenarios, we do have a mix of scenario sizes and a quick guide in the front of the module book. There's a lot of one map scenarios because if you're like me, you only kind of have time for a one map scenario. But there's 1 maps, 2 maps, 3 maps. The East Germans tend to have the 2 and 3 map scenarios, some of them. Oh, those are the new ammo markers.
Yeah, these are just including Keith. These are the ones that when the day that this Kickstarter is funded, day after, 2 days after, we airmail everything printed from here. This is to stop our wonderful Chinese printer from deciding that this isn't red and it's supposed to be magenta or pink. Okay.
Yeah, I said Kev mentioned the Kickstarter video resolution. Yet Dave said he noticed that too. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that.
It's just so you don't look at anybody.
Right. I do want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Somebody said something. Oh, winter maps change. Yeah, Tom Alerts asked. Hang on, let me click. So if I click, you guys will see this question. Is that the idea?
It's
do the winter do the winter maps change the rules, movement, etc.? Technically, no, because we have weather rules in the game now. Now they're based off the battlefield event table, where they can change. That's weather change. But the basic weather rules are available as a chart. And what I recommend is if you're going to play on a winter map, since you're making your own scenario anyway, is look at the 4 weather levels above 0 and see whether it is, you know, light snow, heavy snow, blizzard, whatever it is. Pick that. And right there, you will see the same weather effect you would have if you randomly got that level. That would be the weather level that you start the game with. And you can either say that's the weather level for the entire game, or you can just leave the battlefield event, you know, card in, which most people will, I think, after they get used to it. And it has a random event that, you know, sometimes the weather changes. Not often, but it does. And I can say this, when the weather does change, and we've run it through testing, so it's happened, you know, fairly often, and we leave it at random. We want to know what the random feel is. We don't want to say, oh, you know, we test, obviously we test the rules to start with, but then we're like, how does it fit in? How does it feel? How many times does it happen? That kind of a thing. So based on where it is in the battlefield events table, when weather has changed, it literally changed the entire scenario because now everybody moves differently. Everybody sees differently. People have cover where they didn't have cover. Literally in the open, you can have cover because it's pouring rain. So they just can't see you. It's not so much cover as concealment, but the idea is that it's a very different game and it's the same scenario. So it really adds to replay value. And of course, when it happens in a scenario, but in reference to the winter maps, that would be my suggestion, is just pick something where there's snow on the ground. And, you know, that would be, I guess, well over 2, 3, or 4, although 4 is like horrendous blizzard conditions. You know, there's no aircraft are going to be flying in that. Even all other aircraft, I don't think are going to fly in that. But yeah, you can absolutely do that. So kind of looking forward to that, actually. We had seen prototypes of weather maps basically out of the gate. And at first we were like, oh, I don't know if we could do this, but now it seems that we are. So are there winter map specific scenarios? Not at this time. We were totally invested in just getting scenarios, but you can take any scenario you want. Like I said, flip it to a winter map and add a weather level, and you got a new scenario right there. So you can play the existing ones. I hope that answers the question there.
You know, all this fighting is supposed to take place, you know, in the summertime and end before it's Christmas. You know, who knows?
Right. Yeah. So the big debate is, well, how long does war last? I'm like, I don't really want to pin a number on that, because there's going to be one half of the people who say it should be longer, and one half of the people who it's shorter. And I have an international team on this game, so I've got people from you know, Japan to, you know, England to France and Germany and where else? Oh, Netherlands. Our editor Hans is in the Netherlands, and it gives you a worldwide perspective, because when you have somebody who's French, who has access to French military history, and on this end we're like, oh, I know a guy who drove an M1, and on their side they're something along those lines of, yeah, I know a guy who drove an AMX-30 V2, and you don't get that here. So having that input has really been valuable and helpful. You kind of look at things and go, yeah, maybe we should reevaluate the French, because maybe they were sort of artificially stunted before because of an alleged reputation. But when you look at actual arms sales, they make some pretty good weapons and know how to use them. So I think it'll be, when we get to Volume 3, which is the Untold Battles, where the French make their re-debut, and they will be re-equipped, I think you'll be pleased with the way it is. I mean, we've got order battle research straight from France on that one. So I can't argue with that. Let's see.
Someone's asking here about the book and how that came about. The idea for the book really came off of the lock and load idea. And it was really, my kids got me into playing Halo and a few other of these video games on Xbox. And, they would go to the stores and have us, they would buy these books. And I said, why can't we do this with our war games, And so a lot of you may not realize this, but you may find your names in the book, maybe not. But the object of it.
Sorry, I submitted a list.
Yeah, we did submit a list. Yeah, what we did was we talked to Brad and Brad Smith. Keith turned me on.
Who is on? Hello, Brad.
And that's because of honestly Kevin Sharp. He told to Keith. Keith told it to me, and we. Honestly, being in Japan, we Skyped him and we just hit it off. I mean, he's a great guy, down to earth, loves his war games, and
just debuted one.
Yeah, and so we told him the idea was not that it had Lock and Load. We kind of made the stories, and then Jeff Lewis did a phenomenal job taking those stories and making them into scenarios. We never really planned to make them scenarios. It was because all you guys kept asking, you're going to have scenarios, you're going to have scenarios. And I gave it to Jeff, and Jeff said, yeah, let me read them all, and I think I can do that. And he read them all, and there's your book and scenarios. In this case, Brad, being the writer, was smart enough to stop us from that idea because, what stories do you pick? And he just came with a hell of a better idea. And he took 1 or 2 or 3 of the scenarios he felt were critical, built a whole story. So you're going to see or read, I guess, or listen. 2 very good-looking guys are talking to Reagan in the White House.
That's debatable.
One good one. And it tells the front story or the backstory, how you want to look at it. That what the world is like that spawns this, alternative reality, World War III. And then the rest of it is just a story. So you kind of really get not just a rehash of the story. The battles you're playing, you guys are making the stories. That's what the after action reports are. And what Brad did was Brad is in there telling a great story. And once you get the book, I have to tell you about this parking lot scene Brad told me about, but I can't tell you now.
Hey, Tom Alerts had, because I read this comment, he had an idea, a suggestion for like overlays for a big nuclear crater. And just so you know, there's no nukes on the tactical level because it's a platoon level game and it's not necessary. But yeah, Tom had put a comment for overlays for like a big nuclear crater or something to alter terrain. We have to look really carefully at that kind of stuff from, and I know David has to look at it from a production perspective. I have to look at it from a design perspective. The maps are geomorphic, so that sort of mitigates that to some extent, but I'm not sure. And Dave, I haven't had, to be honest, we haven't had a detailed conversation about it, but we have touched on it a couple times, actually in the last, 2 or 3 years, in our conversations about terrain, overlays or replacements or whatever it is. And it just have to be really careful about it. So I can't give you an answer right now.
Yeah, well, we kind of decided when we started a little bit that we weren't going to have any nukes in it because it really just changes the whole dynamic. I mean, we read a whole story. It actually was a YouTube video, I think, Keith, where the Soviets' plan was to nuke everybody and then go in there to take over the terrain. And it just seems like, game over no matter if you get the terrain or not. I mean, I don't think I'd want a nuclear wasteland per se, but you know what? If there's enough requests for it, we're open to it. I mean, this is one of the reasons we're doing this live stream is to hear what you guys want, hear what you like, hear what you don't like, and kind of, do it that way. Hey, someone's asking about the book. Yes, there will be an audio book. Okay. We might actually make a stretch goal where you can get the audio book instead of the paperback if some people want that. There seems to be a lot of requests I've been getting for that. Or maybe you can, swap the audiobook for the paperback. And if you wanted to buy the paperback separately, I have to really work with products on how we're going to set up the back end. So I don't have 100% answer to that yet.
I have a great question from Alan Tormey. He says he normally plays games like Twilight Struggle or Labyrinth. I have a few small polybag hex encounters, but this is really going to be my first big game like this. So for someone like me, and I don't have a military background, can you recommend good resources to learn about the kind of basic tactical knowledge I'll need to do well? That's a great question. We try to provide information right in the game that will allow you to evaluate your pieces along the lines of a very simple example of what do your chess pieces do? Well, the pawn can, move one until it gets to the queen row. The knight can move, 2 up and 1 across in any direction. The king can move in any direction, unlimited amount until it, it explodes something. But we provided national unit tables. And on those national unit tables, we have, first of all, a picture of the counter front and back. And then we have all of the different rules that affect it. And not everything affects every unit. So it's more like you go along the row and it says, no, 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 yes. Let's say you have a unit that's assault capable, like that has an assault value. It'll tell you it has that value. And then you can look at those values to see which one's higher, which one's greater. But it also has just a plain text description of this is an anti-tank guided missile system. So, you use it against tanks if you don't have a military background. This is, actually, I'm forgetting, a surface to air missile section. So, it's surface to air missile is something that, if you have a limited knowledge that you use against aircraft, there's close air support aircraft in the game. If something is a heavy tank platoon, that up against a light vehicle platoon, you probably have an advantage. Just basic stuff like that. But I guess the community is a great way to get that. I mean, if anybody wants to chime in with any suggestions for, an actual manual kind of a thing, but it's a learning experience. The best way to learn this game, as any game, is to have somebody teach you. We try to put a little bit of, there's also a section in the Storming the Gap manual. Since we're very counter-based, not only do you have the national unit tables that give you the attributes within the game and the rules references to figure out what those are. I mean, you see the yes in a box that says, yes, I'm assault capable. And then you go to the top of the column and it says, oh, assault is, section, am I remembering right? 13? I'm not sure. But in the manual itself, it's sort of flavor, but sort of not. It'll say like, oh, here's the M1. It's a great tank. It has this kind of gun and this kind of armor. And, it's not that it wasn't a great tank, it's that there weren't enough of them, kind of a thing. Where you'll get an anecdotal analysis of what the pieces are. But if you have any questions, specifically about how certain things compare or, what the general idea in a scenario is, hit up the community and say, hey, has anybody played this scenario? And you can always hit me up and I can give you my opinion, but it's just my opinion. This is the kind of game where the designer doesn't really have an advantage in this one because, if you're tough in this, if you're mentally tough, you can win this game almost down to the last Terran, the last counter. We've seen M113s. That was all that was left. Seize the objective and win the game. So I hope that I know it's not a fully detailed resource thing, but there are resources listed in both in the core rules for general, but in the I think, Dave, is that right? There's links in the listed in the scenario manual as well in the front there.
You make me look.
I think, or if not, then you can use the links. What
are you looking for?
The links for community resources and to the forums.
It's in front of the rulebook.
For the rulebook. Okay, so it's in the core rules, yeah.
Just so you know, we have a few resources right now we can share with you. This is what
I like Harry's comment. Flank, flank, flank. That's the key. And that's true. Yeah. And again, I think all of us are the best resource for that if you don't have any knowledge. But remember, we want you to play, and we want to play you. So we're absolutely going to tell you, maybe, especially when people try to use very light vehicles against very heavy vehicles, you kind of go, do you really want to do that? And when you hear that, it's a learning moment. Let's see.
I'm going to put this link up. Keith?
There was a question. Oh, no, you answered that. That was about counters. Yes, the counters will be rounded.
There's a link for you guys on the screen. They'll stay there for 60 seconds if you can see it.
There you go.
To our forum section, it has a sample of the audiobook. It has the first and second edition changes. So if you guys have tried the first edition, you're wondering what the hell we did, there's a link for a PDF. The core rules, in case you do not know this, the core rules are free. You can download them. There's a
sure thing, Alan.
Kit. And
Mo added it to the chat too. There's a link. He has a link there. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It should be the same. Yeah, it's we get questions. Somebody had mentioned, maybe Tom, maybe it was you, about a 4-inch box. That's a production question. I don't think anybody makes a 4-inch.
Say right now, Darren's listening at you. He's giving you the hex, man.
Hi, Darren.
Yes. He put a gasket when I went to the 3-inch box. So, and then the main reason for it is the box has become, you guys don't, a lot of people don't think about it now. It's the shipping. Okay. The shipping with the size and the weight. We literally printed every component out at the time, put it in a box, and figured out what the weight would be in the dimensions. So our shipping rates are hopefully very accurate. Okay. We even put the stretch goals in for the most part. Okay. So you guys get an idea. I'm not going to say no because I can change anything right now until I give it to China, but I just can't see a 4-inch box doing well. And the box itself, the dimensions of the box makes it a problem of collapsing upon itself, etc. So we're thinking about it, but I don't think so in this case.
Yeah, so far we have 2 additional counter sheets with the stretch goals, Dave, or 3 at this point?
3 or 4.
2, I think. 2.
No. One of the modules has 2. Another one has
1.
And then there's
one.
The admin,
right.
The
admin, right. So the possibility is up for an additional 4 counter sheets.
We want
plus the 7 in the game.
Yeah, we really want to make
that's a lot.
Inexpensive as possible to ship to you guys. Okay, because that's the big whammy at the end is the shipping. So we took real precautions to get the shipping right.
Hey Nate. We have the Gimpy Gainer online, guys.
You know what? We got Nate on here now, guys.
Yeah.
Just so you know, I'm going to put another link up there. Give me 1 second. We have going to have videos for the rulebook for World at War 5 and Nate's current work, Nations at War. Look at that. He's leaving now, isn't he?
And best bag.
Okay. And I'm going to, where is it? Boot camp. No. We call it the World at War 85 Boot Camp. There's 3 videos there now. One by our beloved developer right here, Keith, on the line of sight. And the first 2 are really just an introduction. But the object here is to really give you guys a chance to see how the production quality is going to be for the World at War 85. And again, it's not to be used instead of the rulebook. It's really there to be as an aid. Hey, you really want to Keith's rules? I'm like, I'm not getting it. And we're hoping the video, closes the deal for you.
Right.
Okay, there's a link, guys, on the chat for the World at War Bootcamp. Like I said, there's only 3 videos there now, but gives you a good idea. Nate, can't thank you enough, buddy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, because Nate did some stuff when we were on a playtest version, and I'm looking at this going, wow, this is great.
Keith,
So now we've got
song and dance bit for the rules, and
no. We're not doing War 85 the musical. We're not doing that.
springtime for Keith. No.
All right. Oh, say yeah. Actually, Tom Alerts has another one. Let me see. Will the maps be printed two sides, winter, summer? I don't know, Dave. Do we have a perspective on that?
Oh, I missed that question. I mean, I got.
Oh, are the maps going to be two-sided, winter, summer?
Hey guys, here's what we can do. As I was saying about the shipping, we wanted to keep the cost down, so we did not make mounted maps. It adds pounds to the game, especially now with the Kickstarter stretch goals. So what we're going to do is make them single-sided. Okay, so they will not be double-sided. This allows people who want to mount the map boards to be able to do it. If we made them double-sided, it would make life a little difficult. So they will be single-sided. So it'll be, when you get 8 Fold Your Gap maps, you'll be getting, and you got the winter ones, you'll be getting 16, 8 winter and 8 summer.
Now I remember this conversation. Okay. Yeah, and the other thing that came up was that some people play double-sided, and one of the complaints that came our way was that when you have double-sided, you get wear and tear on the bottom side. So yeah, you're playing with your winter maps for the first 6 months, and you turn them over and they're all scratched and that kind of thing. So having single-sided, I think, is probably a better decision as far as that goes. And also, if it's single-sided, you can put them up on a magnet board if anybody can invest in that. And I haven't had one of those in years, but and then you still have your map to play on the table if you want to play a quick scenario.
Yeah, the other thing too is someone's asking about the paper. It's not a paper map in the sense that it's
Oh no, like an old SPI paper map. No, it's cardstock.
It is. It's a heavy, over 100-pound paper stock cardboard. I mean, I have them here. Okay, and these are just these are. I don't know if anyone
playtest.
You guys can see that. Yeah. Okay, but they're thick paper. They're not going to bend. They're perfect. Also, for those who want to use plexiglass, okay, those want to mount on the wall. If you want to put them on your own chipboard, so really, we're trying to give everyone their way of doing it. Okay, kind of like Burger King without the hamburger.
That's a heavy map. It was heavy to make too. Yeah. We have an amazing map encounter artist, Mark Von Marshall, who and I literally give him sketches because I just have to tell him the terrain type, and he's worked out a library of all these symbols, and it's really amazing. If you really got down to it with a magnifying glass, you'd find clumps of trees and things in his design. I was kind of shocked to find that. And you may not see it in normal play, but it sort of does enhance the background experience.
I'm looking for it right now on the Kickstarter page. It's I'm going to put the link on here too. It's really the designer notes from Keith on how we developed the maps. I mean, Keith really, in my opinion at least, went over and above for that. And I was like, we're still doing the maps? Aren't we done yet? Keith and I really wanted to get it right. Here's a link, guys. I'm going to put it here. This shows you the maps. And one of the images here, 2 of the images show you the old game map and the new game map, so you can actually see how different it is. And I think you'll find it pretty telling. And then the last picture is actually the historical maps, which Keith got. I forget who you got them from. Then Keith's drawing of those historical maps, and then Mark's conversion of those drawings. So it gives you quite a bit of news. So hold on, I'm going to post that.
Yeah, Tom's like 25 map sheets in total. Yeah, it's a lot for and this is now. I will tell you this. I mean, the maps were the first thing we did for the planned series of 8 games. We can't do everything. You got to produce one game at a time. But the maps were something that were sort of in a production stream to our artist, so we did them all for all the planned games. Now, that's not to say they may not change, but we are numbering them sequentially. So when you see one of these expansion maps be map 46, it's because there's 45 maps before that. 1, 2, and 3 are already coming in Storming the Gap, but 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. That's 5 maps are going to be coming in Blood and Fury, which is Volume 2. I think there's 7 in Untold Battles because of the number of old modules that we pulled in. We pulled in, I think, 3 or 4 modules pulled into that one. That'll be the largest game, the third in the series, the Untold Battles.
How many count sheets? Is that the one with the 10, 12 counter sheets on it?
Something like 12 or 13 counter sheets to start. So, this Kickstarter has been an education for me. Kickstarter's been an education for me as we plan for, we're going to need counter sheets. I'm like, okay. Storming the Gap is actually the smallest game. Yeah. The Storming the Gap is the smallest game in terms of counter sheets at this point. I think it's almost smallest game, I think. There's a bunch of modules, volumes. I call them volumes to distinguish them. A module sounds like something that, isn't complete in some way and has to attach it. We have expansions for the individual games. So that Full the Gap scenario and counters and maps, that's an expansion that you add to Storming the Gap using counters with Storming the Gap, and you can play it. Any expansion we do on any individual volume is just for that volume. So you're not going to get stuck with, well, I want to play this, scenario that, somebody made up. We had instances of that. But it says I need to have 2 of these different volumes. That's not going to happen. Any scenario that we give you, any counter sheet we give is going to fit with the game that it's an expansion for. That's why all the games in this series, the base games, they are all standalone games. If you don't want to play the potential Arab-Israeli version, you don't have to buy it. If you have no interest in that, if you don't want to play, South Africa, which was already had a war in it in the real world in '85, you don't have to do that. If you don't want to play Scandinavia, why would you not want to play Scandinavia? Doesn't anybody want to play a Swedish S-Tank? I do. But it's the idea is that you don't, people are already like, oh, am I gonna have to buy the whole series? No, just buy the game you want. Kickstarter has brought me a new perspective in terms of this. Is you guys are more experienced on Kickstarter. I've backed a couple of games, but it was a long time ago and it was different, and then being on this side of the table of that, it's very different here. And I can't express my gratitude for the support you guys have shown. And every time you put a comment up, I'm like, oh, I need to read that. It's like, you're bad for me because I'm like reading on the train. I'm reading at work. Shh. Should not be doing that. But it's been a different experience, but we're trying to give you, I think what we all kind of want is, convenience and completeness and polish. Concept of the game is really good as far as I'm concerned. Put the combat system on the counters, speeds things up immensely. We played the largest scenario in this game, which is actually scenario 19, called the Rhine, and we played it a couple of times. No, 3 times. I'm sorry, at WBC when we were demoing, and when we weren't demoing, we were playing for ourselves. And twice we played. I played it once against Jeff Schulte and once against Patrick White, who works in the office, who's been a huge supporter of this since day one. And I appreciate that, Patrick. He's back there somewhere. But I know he's back. Me too. We managed, with interruptions for demoing to people and lunch and stuff like that, bathroom, that kind of thing. It still took, all told, 5 or 6 hours minus 2 hours of break, 4 hours for the largest scenario, which should fit in an afternoon or an afternoon and an evening. If you're relaxing about it, it just plays really fast, and it's I find it really satisfying. Nate, I'm gonna not so much throw Nate under the bus, just pull him onto the bus for this one. He made a wonderful comment to me, I guess you put it in your video, so I can actually say this, where the biggest scenarios is like you've got everything in this. You've got mortars, and you've got self-propelled artillery, and you've got tank charges, you've got infantry charges. You got infantry on infantry fights in the middle of what I think most people consider this to be an armor game. If I can tell you the number of back and forth World War I style infantry charges to take hills and retake hills, and they're exciting. They're not boring. Infantry is not boring in this game. One of the things that I'll point out, I'll let you guys in on a little secret, which if you read the rules closely, and you know anything about the old game, there's no overrun in this game, only assault. Tanks do not get to roll over things in the open, and then usually infantry, and then just keep going, basically. I mean, they do get a bonus hex if they manage to do it. They'll get an extra hex, so they're not, totally stoppable. But the idea is that infantry in 1985 are not infantry from, say, World War II. where, yeah, you had a bazooka. Yeah, you had a Panzerfaust or a Panzerschreck or whatever it was. And yeah, you could be effective very close and you'd be really careful and always get them from the flank or the rear because it was going to bounce on the front or get the track, if you could. 1985, the infantry weapons down, the anti-tank infantry weapons down on the the squad and the platoon level, they wanted you to get close. I'm talking to my infantry guys, and these are like, I got one of my best buddies he was running a light infantry platoon in 85, and he's like, no, we like it when they come to us. So it was a different attitude, and I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there, some tankers or something, who are going to say otherwise. But as I researched this game, every arm of the armed forces had a different attitude, but they were all really, really positive. If they were artillery guys, they're like, yeah, we rule. If they were tanker guys, they're like, yeah, we rule. If they were infantry guys, they're like, yeah, we rule. And everybody had nicknames for everybody else that weren't necessarily, anything but camaraderie derogatory. But the idea was actually made me feel really good about the armed forces. I mean, I'm a huge armed forces fan. But to have everybody have that really positive attitude. Engineers, my good buddy Steve Overton was a combat engineer. Having these guys who have direct experience, because he was doing that in 85, and you get things like, I said, I need bridge rules, and how long does it take to build a bridge? And he looks at me straight faced because he's totally serious, and he's like, well, what kind of bridge you want? I got 4 different kinds of bridges I can build for you out of the gate. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And we did go over them because every time I talk to Steve, it's always an education and it's always positive, and he's always very, very supportive. So we have great conversations. And so we had to compromise because, you've got we do have a die 6 system here, so it doesn't have as much flexibility as, a percentage system or a system that's individual tanks. We do have platoons, but in the end, I think what we have feels good. It feels, exciting, and it's because it's based as close as possible in reality, but any game is a distillation of that reality. So, all right, I've chatted enough here. Let me see if I missed anything. What people really want to talk about here.
Hey, so about the scenarios. If the box says there's 20 scenarios in the game,
Mo is misbehaving.
I know.
But he's the Marine. He's allowed to.
But if there's 20 scenarios listed in the box, you're going to get 20 scenarios. Now, you might actually find 23 in the book. And the reason is we got, there was some issues from people telling us, hey, the box says it's, 20 scenarios, but I can only play 15 of them because 5 of them requires me to have other modules.
Right.
What we do, we put what's 100% playable in the game. And if we decide that, hey, we can do a great blah, blah, blah over here and combine the 2 games, it won't sit on a box. It'll be inside. It'll say, hey, if you want to play these extra 3 scenarios, the bonus is, and here's what you need. So you'll always be able to play what you get.
Oh, I see Date's comment. True story. Thank you. I'm glad I got that right because I didn't want to not get that. Let's see. I want to make sure I don't miss any questions here.
Questions.
I think I got to all the Q&A ones.
Let me see.
Oh, here's one. Harry had put in. We answered the question about the solo cards. Maybe I don't know if he was here for that. We're considering adding as an add-on the solo deck if it doesn't reach the goal. Is that what we said?
No, we'll do it.
Right.
We'll do it.
I would do it. But he also said, "Are we going to Kickstarter the rest of the series or just this one?" And I think other people had asked that as well.
Okay. That's a me question.
Yeah, that's definitely a you question.
We plan to do a lot more Kickstarter, and our company rule is, for those who know, I took over Lock and Load. We printed 27 games and expansions and add-ons for all the Lock and Load and Nations at War games at once. Bad idea. It was a lot of work, way too much pressure, but we wanted to get everything back in stock. I mean, the company didn't have a lot of stock of everything. So that has changed. We consolidated and made everything core games and modules or expansions. Okay, so going forward, as long as everything is done, okay, like we did here, and we have all the artwork and we're happy with everything and we're just tinkering, it will go on Kickstarter. Okay, it allows us to give it to you guys at a better price. It makes life much easier for us on production costs, okay, because you guys are basically funding us to be able to print it. Now, that's what it comes down to. What we do not want to do is make you wait a year and a half as we develop the game and argue about this and do that.
No, I'm done. I'm sorry. That took a year. I'm done developing. You guys are time for you to play.
As soon as that game is announced for Kickstarter, it is done. There is no development. My personal belief is the company has to have some skin in the game. Our skin is the developers, the cost of the prototypes, making all the artwork and everything ready. So you guys, when you fund something with us, you're funding the product that is done and just waiting for printing. Okay? And we really don't think this is going to slip from our due date. Maybe it will, God knows things can happen, but it won't be because we're developing something. It'll be because we're printing something and something didn't go the way we like it, or we want to do something, or it wasn't what we expect.
Yeah, we have to look at the print prototypes, and color is a big deal when you have as many formations as we have, and each one has a color band. So, and each nationality has a color, and some of them can be close. So they really need to be right. So yeah, we need to be really careful on when we see those print prototypes.
The guys asked us about the process. The process is really simple. Game's ready to go at Kickstarter. We send to China the day after we get funding a complete printed game. We have our own print shop here. We do a lot of our own printing. The only thing we don't do is actually make direct counters. We make laser cut counters, but we don't make actual counters, die cut. But everything else gets printed, stuck together. Keith, in this case, me and Blackwell and Mark will approve everything. We're going to fly that example with all the artwork files to China. This way, there's no way the printer in China, no matter who it is, or even here in the States, can say, oh, I didn't know that was the green you wanted. They're going to have a printed physical copy and all the digital files by us ready to go. Okay, and what they do is they basically print the game. They give us the prototypes. We'll get a bunch of prototypes back. And Keith and Jeff, myself, Blackwell, Mark, and a lot of other guys, well over 12 of us, will go through all the components. There will be no guessing at, what we're getting. Okay, and that's pretty much the process. The game gets printed, shipped, and we have. I want to give a nice round of thank you to Uwe and all of his help on the Kickstarter. He helped us nicely with his shipping partners. So these will be EU-friendly shipping and Australia-friendly shipping. Most of the games will leave China and go to the companies that are going to ship them for us in these countries. So it should keep any VAT charges, taxes to the lowest possible. I can't guarantee it, guys, but if something happens or goes wrong, open up a support ticket. We will help you. We will work with you.
I see a couple of comments here. Nate mentions that, from maps, just to go for maps for a second. Is that posters? Hang on. Poster frames can work really well. And somebody else mentioned top loaders. There are giant top loaders. I use 24 by 36. Actually, they're larger than that because that's right. 24 by 36 because the maps are 22 by 33. Remember the old standard SPI maps were 22 by 33. These maps, the individual ones, are 13 and a quarter by 19 and a quarter. So together they'll be 26 and a half by 39, 38 and a half, something like that. So, but you can get 40-inch top loaders, I think. And it's a giant top loader, like a giant baseball card that's flexible. So you can, and what I do is I actually cut off two of the sides. So there's only one side attached because it's, it's plastic welded, basically. I just open it up, drop the maps in, line them up, and drop the top back on. And you can draw on that, And I have a secret for you guys. I don't know. Some of you guys probably know. Anybody who's in the military may know this, but if you have a permanent marker, you can write on something and then you can actually erase it by taking another permanent marker, writing on top of it, making it liquid, and quickly wiping it with a tissue, because like dissolves like, and that happens for permanent markers too. So it doesn't get it clean. You want to use a liquid cleaner for that, but you can actually do that. That's what I use as permanent markers on my stuff. But I don't draw it on all that much, but like Kev Sharp will sometimes draw on. You're right, Kev, where sometimes you'll draw on the plexi. And I don't know whether you use dry erase or whether you use permanents, but it's just having that ability to like say, here's my victory point city and circle it to me is always a flexible thing. But to have the protection, make sure you don't have to tape the maps also if they're in the top loader, basically, because it's so flat. So I imagine the same thing with the poster frames that Nate mentioned. Oh, dry erase and chalk pencils. There you go. Yeah, that sounds good.
Are we missing any other questions anyone asked? Let's see.
Let's see. Oh, here's one. Touching back on wanting scenarios from the community. If the design uses, this is from Harry Coins.
Okay.
Touching back on wanting scenarios from the community. If the design uses resources from multiple volumes, would they still be wanted? Maybe guidelines or at least a list of what kind of scenarios you don't want. If you're looking to get it published somewhere, I would stay away from stuff that crosses volumes. But on the other hand, you're gonna have so much in each volume. It's like, well, what if you want to use the British and the Americans, and the British are in volume 2 and the Americans in 1? It's like there's some Americans in Blood and Fury and then volume 2. But yeah, I'll let Dave speak to this.
I'm gonna counter Keith on that. I don't mind what. I'm willing to look at anything. Okay, Keith is going to look at it too. He may say, "I don't want that. No way, it can't happen."
David will say, "Go away, Keith."
Yeah. We do that a lot to each other,
right?
But the reality is, listen, you just have to be clear. If it's going to take volume 1 and volume 2, and we put it into compendium, we just have to say, "Hey, these scenarios." Like I said before, if we're given the compendium, we say this is for volumes 1, 2, and 3, which is fine. Okay, then they know that the scenarios sometimes for game 1, game 2, game 3, and sometimes you can mix them.
Right, and I would throw it out to Dave that we'd have a section called mixed volume scenarios, so you don't have to sift through them to find out which ones are mixed volume and which ones are individual volume. But just off the top of my head, so since we don't have it right now.
Part of the genius of what Keith did was, I don't know how much you guys can see of this. But the cards, do I have the cards in here? Okay. Why is it not showing up?
It's showing up for us, but
no, here it is. The whole reason we went with the color band and took the names off the counters, the unit formations, was so we could do so many more things with the cards, okay, and not be limited because the first Soviet tank army is everywhere. It's in all over the place, and the idea was to switch to the card so we can give it better, change the morale, change the command radius, and let you use all those cards.
Sorry about that. I had an interruption.
Right. What else do we have there?
That's all I see on that list. Good night, Nate.
Night, Nate.
Bobby Bacon Hat. I love that name. So double stacks, direct firing, and a single unit attacks separately, right? In other words, a stack of 2 units, direct firing, a single unit attacks separately. That is correct. Yes, direct fire is by individual unit. Indirect fire attacks the hex. And that'll be 1 unit at a time, but it attacks both units in the hex if it's a stack.
Someone's asking about the dice. Okay, guys, I'm going to go through this. This was something, not this particular set, but a set my son got me a couple of Father's Days ago. Anyway, this is the case that the dice will come in, okay? It'll probably, we're not sure if it's going to say Lock and Load or World at War 85, Storming the Gap, but it basically comes off like that. Let's not drop this in front of everybody. Let's see how I can best show that. And those are the dice. The reason I like these is I don't get to play a lot of games because I'm constantly getting told to do this by the wire, this for the company. So when I play, I really want to play.
Print this game, David.
Yeah, this game, exactly. Okay. And basically what I wanted was, I noticed that a lot of the dice I was using kept getting a lot more of the same numbers than I felt was mathematically feasible. And I believe her name is Lori. She talked to us, and I told her my complaint, and she makes these perfectly balanced aluminum dice. I really love them, honestly. So that's what these dice are. It's not a necessity. So, it's not like you need them to play. Okay. And yes, that is Kami Red and NATO Blue. Okay.
And it's going to be that way the whole series, whether or not. No, we have the term NATO allied and pact allied for anybody who's not actually in NATO or the pact in one of the later volumes.
But anyway, like I said, so it's just that's what they are. I like playing with them. I like the fact that they're balanced. I would recommend that you have some type of dice box or roller that's kind of maybe cushioned a little bit, so they bounce a little bit more. They'll be a little bit more durable or last a little bit better. I mean, I've been using these dice for 2 or 3 years, and they hold up pretty nicely. I haven't had any problems.
Masamune had a question. I did see it. I'm sorry. We were getting through other stuff. The question was, how long do I need for a game playing solo? I presume that means how much time it takes to do a solo scenario. And my experience has been, because I was running a one map scenario with one formation aside, so that's pretty much as small as you can get. And it would take me less than 40 minutes to do 8 turns. I am fast. But, if you're doing a regular scenario where there's, say, 2 or 3 formations aside and 2 maps, probably take you, an hour and a half, 2 hours. I can't really give you a better gauge than that. Other than it takes about the same time as a regular game. It's just you have to read the cards for the other players that are reading their mind. I think I get everything here. All right. Anybody who I missed, just try typing your question in again, and I'll pick it up at the bottom.
More questions from Mo.
There's no question from Mo.
Hey, I'll show some of this one. We're waiting to see. I don't know, Keith, if you want to talk about anything here in particular.
Well, yeah. Some people, again, this is for people who are not familiar with the game. This is the easiest way to see in real big form, because this is a player aid, what all those numbers mean, how the combat system does in fact fit on the counters. For people who are used to playing the old game, we rearranged a couple of the number groups, and it's an easy way to get used to that. But the concept is, here you've got this T62, and you got the nice art and everything that Mark Marshall put on it. But the upper left is your armor piercing group, and I won't go through the numbers just yet. And the upper right is the high explosive group. So the stuff on the top is like the turret, it fires. The stuff on the bottom, left to right, is armor, movement, and assault. Now, assault technically fires, but you're allowed to move before you actually use it, and you have to be in the person's hex. So we sort of generalize. So the stuff on top fires, the stuff on bottom, is everything else. So that's sort of a mnemonic for remembering, where things are. People who are used to the older system, I played the old, that's how I got in, was the old system too. And Jeff Schulte, he literally has thousands of counters in the old system. It's very easy to get used to it. When you start looking for movement in the middle, and then the bottom sort of gels, and you look left for your armor, and anywhere there's 2 digits, it's just distinction between the 2-digit groups and the 3-digit groups. They sort of fit on the bottom, and the triple groups on the top. Now, in the upper left there, I think you guys can see the 11-3-5. First of all, you can see our new typeface, which you can distinguish between the 3s and the 5s. Everything is larger. We've tried to outline everything or give it a color where it just sort of jumps off the counter, because that's what we want. We want you guys to be able to read it at the table. But it basically runs range on the left, so that's a range of 11. That's the printed range or the effective range. The 3 is the number of firepower dice. And again, this is the armor piercing group, so you'd use this against a heavy armor target or a light armor target. And I won't go into that detail. That'll take all night. So it's 3 dice, basically, is the firepower. And the 5 says you need to roll a 5 or higher to get a hit. So you'll roll 3 dice, 3 of those wonderful red or blue dice, or a combination thereof. And for each 5 or 6 you roll, you would get a hit. Now, for those who haven't played the game yet and may not have read the rules, it's an interactive combat system. So every shot, there is a check against, say, armor, if it's an armor target, which in this case it is, or if it's a soft target, there is a default 5 or 6, basically, it's checked against. But the number of dice you'd roll would be based on the terrain you're in. But just to go back to armor, armor's the lower left group, so it's 3 dice. Again, that's the armor number to make 6. So if this T62 were shot at by itself, it would roll 3 dice, and for each 6, it would ignore one of the hits that was applied against it. So that's why it's interactive. And people say, well, how can you do that? It's like, well, it's a platoon level game, and these are 5 to 15 minute turns. a lot can happen. Somebody can turn a flank. Somebody can, find cover he didn't have before, whatever. There's lots of reasons why the hit was not as effective. The mechanism just says, ignore. You can call it anything you want to, save and ignore, or whatever it is, whatever's convenient. But the idea is that the attacker's not as effective because of something the defender did. And that's the combat system. And then whatever hits remain, they get applied. 1 hit disrupts, 2 hits reduce and disrupt, and the 3rd hit kills you outright. If you're already disrupted, you're already in a spot where you're going to take reductions. And again, you probably don't remember in the counter sheets, most units are 2 steps. So you'd reduce and then eliminate. There's disruption in the middle there, where that's sort of a state you can have whether you're reduced or you're at full strength. If you're a 1-step unit and you're reduced, you're dead. So it's just easier to kill. Soft targets, if you look in the lower right, there's a red unit that I guess you can see it. It's an air assault symbol. It's a Soviet air assault. You probably can't see, but there's a yellow circle there inside the box that has an S. That's for soft target. You got to back up a little, Dave. Right at the very bottom there. That's good. That's good. Soft target means that you derive your, not so much armor value as your defensive bonus from the terrain you're in. So if that infantry unit or that soft target, or it could be a gun, we call them troops either way, but a soft target is in, say, woods, you'll get 1 die. And if you roll a 5 or 6 on that die, once again, you can save or ignore an attacking hit. And that's the way the combat system works generally. Doesn't matter whether it's indirect fire, direct fire, you always have a number of dice and a number to roll against. This particular player aid, it's 11 by 17. We wanted to make it big. It has every status and every value that's in the game on the one sheet, and it has the rules references for them too. So there's a lot of cross-indexing in this game. There's a table of contents that I'm very proud of because that's how I find things. So because we didn't have the index, but we have a full index. It's, I don't know, what is it, 10, 15 pages?
Yeah, it's big.
It's big.
Yeah,
it's a lot. It's a full index.
There's something you want to thank for that. That's Al Davis, man. That guy.
Right. He's pretty amazing. But the idea is that there's some people like to find stuff by table of contents. Some people like to find stuff by index. Some people like to go to the player aid, find the rules reference, and go to the rules. I'm gonna call out Kev Sharp here when we were playing at BGG Con. Now he's very familiar with the old game. Very familiar with the old game. He, if I'm remembering correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Kev, he said he only needed to use 2 of the player aids, and then he just slid right into the game because that's how similar it is. If not, it's a simplified version in certain aspects. It's not a more complex version. So streamlined, yes, totally streamlined. Just on the counter design, we designed in, there were little plus signs and infinity symbols and underscores that were very difficult to read and crowded the counter. And if you missed them, as I did, you never used your units as capably as you wanted to. We just needed to get rid of that. That's why there is color coding, and we did have to address colorblind issues. And I apologize in advance. When I investigated color blindness, there's like 17 different types of color blindness, and I'm not a doctor. So there was no way I could account for all of them, but we did. Here's the index. That's table of contents. Yeah, I can't even read it. It's so blurry. But we did our best, and on the national unit tables where there is a lot of that, we substituted symbols, we made symbols in addition to the color, so that people who have difficulties with color can read the extra capabilities of an individual unit that's on the national unit tables. It's a huge thing that we tried to tackle, and I apologize in advance if people have difficulty. But another reason the national unit tables are there is that there is a picture of the counter for each nation. So if someone can only see shades and not necessarily colors, it should match that the shades of the national colors, so they know what they're looking at, and so they know their units from other units. This table, you can't see the detail, it's double-sided, but it's every die roll in the system, and that's from now to whenever. This is it's not that difficult a system, but this is every kind of die roll. So you can actually just go to this if you're looking for a die roll, and it'll give you the die roll. If you need the detail, yeah, you may want to go back to the rules, and that's what the yellow box says is, if there's exceptions or modifiers, you may want to check the rules, but most of it's here pretty much.
And it's all all rule reference too. That's
yeah, it's all rule reference. So, you know, if you suspect there's something missing, just go back to the rule. Again, these are all different ways. There's so much paper in this box. They're all different ways to get to the same information because people learn differently. People use play rates differently. You know, some people want to memorize the rules. Some people want to have a subset of the rules on a chart. We do have a very detailed sequence of play card because that has it's everything you do. There's nothing left out, and there's rules references for everything. We really try to make it information friendly without being information scary, but there is a lot of paper in the box. So this is just a quick card. This is just a list of the formation cards. The formation cards, if we swap out a formation card, what's on the formation cards now that used to be on the HQ counters is the morale training value, which you use a lot. It's a 2d6 roll for just about anything that deals with morale or training. And then the command ranges of whether the HQ is at full strength or it's at reduced strength. We took that information off and put it on a card because that meant that I could use, let's say I have an M1 company of 3 M1, platoons, 3 pieces, and they have an orange color band, and I have an orange card, and it's the 1st of 5th Queen's Own Rangers. I'm just making this up. And we want to change it. We have another unit that say the Quintonian Guard, and they're just not as good for whatever reason. We substitute another card with the same color band, but now it has a morale training value that's less and possibly a command range that's less. But you use the same counters. Now its entire character of those 3 pieces has been changed because the morale training value, which is how it recovers from disruption, how it spots for indirect fire, onboard indirect fire, onboard indirect fire as an option. There are a lot of things are based on morale training. Missile ammo will replenish, but obviously M1s wouldn't have that. But the idea is that we can change the character of that formation just by substituting a card. So we went with that, and that meant we could use the same set of counters, but give them a different character. And you can do this too and design your own. Now, we did go with real-world formation names on these cards. Obviously, that was one of the ways. We took them all, took the names of the formations off the counters. We put them on the cards, but now we can swap them out. So, yeah, this might be, Fox of the 2nd 11th ACR. It might be Alpha of the 1st 11th ACR. How do you differentiate? Why would you do that? Because you have attachments, and the attachments can go with any company or battalion. So you might characterize Alpha as, Alpha 11 ACR as, they've got the 2 M1 platoons and the 2 M3 Bradley platoons, but they might have an M106 attached, with mortars, or they might have M901 ITO section attached with anti-tank guided missiles, in addition to their own tank guns and the Bradley's anti-tank guided missiles. The design your own possibilities are pretty much endless, and with geomorphic maps for the game too. Yeah, you're not getting 3 maps. You're getting 3 maps that fit in 4 different directions. I can't even do the math on that, and that's just 3. And one of the stretch goals was a 4th map to complete that set, because of the games that we're doing, a bunch of them are like sort of a rump set of scenarios that people did that we said we're going to develop this into a full set of scenarios and a game, but we didn't have a counter set. We had like 1 battalion on a side kind of a thing. So it's not really a counter set. So we developed that out and say, well, what is this campaign all about? We got up campaign maps. We have, those nice arrows that go across the maps to say, well, who's winning in our version of this World War III. And it may not be yours, but it's in ours. And then we said, well, we're going to have, 6 counter sheets, plus a marker one. So 7 counter sheets is sort of the minimum. That's why I say Storming the Gap is one of the smallest ones in that respect. But it just ended up that way. It was accidental. But the plan was there'll be 7 counter sheets, and then there'll be 4 maps. So 4 geomorphic maps is a lot of map combinations. And then you get the ability of 1 mappers, 2 mappers, 3 mappers, and 4 mappers. And again, we weight it toward the 1 mappers in the scenarios that we're making, but the designer, the battle generator, and any campaigns that you guys come up with, you can use as many maps as you want. It's one of the things we have is a battalion regiment activation system is one of our stretch goals, and that helps with larger map scenarios, which I call regimental scenarios, where you have 4 maps or 6 maps or something like that.
Someone asked about historical maps. Yes, we might. I mean, we might make a module for it where there's a map that's not geomorphic, and you just play a certain campaign with certain units. But right now, we don't have any of those. The other things asked is Spiral Bound Rulebook. Okay, as you probably guys have noticed, okay, the rules. I hate this screen like that. It's spiral bound. Okay. So we can hold it like this and keep it nice and flat. What we're going to do, okay, is the rule book that comes in the game is just stapled, like a regular rule book is. But we're going to make an add-on, okay, that you can request a spiral bound rule book, okay. Now, I will tell you this, the rule book is free. You can download the rule book now, and you can go to Kinko's or your printing shop of choice and spiral bound. I've heard as much as $100 to spiral bound it, to $80 to spiral bound it. I'm sure it'll be a lot cheaper than that. And if you want to use it as an add-on, you can do it for this. And we'll have it available to do in the scenario book, which right now we never do. We never do that. The last thing we're going to show you before we call it a night, okay, is this is the unit summary card that Keith was talking about. This is
that's one of the national unit tables for the U.S.
And I can't really get any closer here, but you can see it shows every counter type. Okay, the stripes are not important as far as the color bands go.
Right.
But I'm going to expand this out a little bit. And I can't really see the screen anymore, Keith, so you're going to have to tell me.
Yeah,
These boxes at the bottom here, those were just colors, and they'll use in the end of the sheet to show the special functions. Those are the boxes that we've changed that now have a symbol in it.
Right.
To represent. So if you are having a problem with the colors, you can see the symbol in each one of those boxes. And if you don't have a problem with the colors, then you'll be fine. You'll just have a symbol and a color.
Right.
Anything you want me to point out, Keith? Or?
It's really hard to say. At the top, where the column header is also where the rules reference is. Just so you know, there's Y's and dots. Dots mean it doesn't have enough capability. Y usually means it does. There's some footnotes, relatively minor. Back towards the counters themselves, there's the description of what the actual text is on the counter. So if you're like, I can't, if somebody comes back after all this time and says, I can't read the title of the counter, if you can see the values, you can look on this chart and it will tell you the exact title of the counter. And then also there's the general description, like I was talking about before, of what the counter is and is what its function is. And basically it's led by 17, four-sided for the US, for the West Germans, for the Soviets, and for the East Germans. So there's 16, there's 8 cards right there. Just there. So that's why I say you get a lot of paper in the box. But I think people find them useful. And eventually people will memorize them. But then there'll always be the dispute of that's not right, and they'll go back to the card, and there it'll be.
Okay, well, I'll show one other thing real fast.
Yeah, and actually, I want to answer one question that was here. Masamune says, any plans to have maps over several countries or involving sea and planes? I will say it's not an air game, and by extension, it's not a naval game. However, there is one volume that will have a bay with an island in it. As far as planes go, we're just going to use close air support. We're not going into an air game on top of that. Close air support is about as close to abstracted as you're going to get, but you have a counter for it and a card. I can't say about there is a naval ship somewhere in one of these modules, but I apologize, I don't remember off the top of my head. But maps over several countries. We're going with geomorphic maps in them, but they'll vary by climate. They'll geomorphic, but like your Arab Israeli maps are not going to match in tone your Europe maps, which that doesn't mean you can't use them next to them. The series is stretching over lots of different countries, and I use the technique of going to Google Maps to start to get an idea of what the current terrain is. And depending on the resources of getting historical maps, which can be pretty slim, at least the configuration of the hill, hills are not going to change all that much in the time. Rivers are not going to change all that much, although they do. Forests tend to be the things that change more as civilization advances. We cut down more trees. but basically working off of real world maps to start with. So they should feel real. And I do look in the geographic area of the country and where I think the campaign will go on the campaign map. So it's not uninformed. It's just that when you guys actually take like even the Fulda Gap map, those 8 maps, if you actually put them on a real map, see how tiny a space it is you're actually playing in as far as the rest of the planet. But it's still enough room to maneuver and have a good time. So I hope that answered the question.
All right. This is the people have had a lot of issues with the line of sight, and Keith has outdid himself with this. Again, I'm having trouble seeing the camera and seeing the card because it's backwards. That's why. And those are all the examples of the line of sight. They're color coded. If you flip this open and make, you can see all the examples Keith put in there, showing you what's blocked, what's not blocked. Yeah, really did a great job on this. And here's the back end of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I tried to give on the line of sight example because line of sight's not different than many other games. It is a very basic triangular system because, like I said, it's a die-6 system. It's platoon level. We made the choice that if you're on a hill, you can only fire from the edge of the hill because these are 150-yard hexes. If you're 150 yards back from the edge of a hill, you can't see through the hill down. You just can't. So that made our line of sight job because the old game had the old game's line of sight was one case of our line of sight, but the additional cases are not difficult. The worst math you have to do is, I'm firing at you and there, and I'm on a hill and you're on the ground and there's a woods in between. Am I closer to the woods? Yeah, then I can see over it. That's about as tough as it gets. If you're equidistant, though, you're not going to get to fire. That you got to get used to. There's a lot of diagrams to explain that. I tried to make them as simple as possible. I also tried to do them from both a top view and a side view so you can get a visible sense of, what we're trying to say when we say, okay, if I'm closer to the obstacle and I'm higher, then I'm going to be able to see over it.
Okay, guys, last call. Guys, got any other questions? Now's the time.
So, and thank you all for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we really want to thank you for the guys for the turnout. We really want to thank you for the support. I mean, it was really so much more than any of us anticipated.
Yeah, it really blew me away. I mean, I'm ever grateful.
Okay, last question. Is this good for a beginner? I can't see how we could possibly make this any easier to play. It really is a very easy game to learn. I mean, we have my 12-year-old nephew playing with us. He's not winning, but he's playing, and I think that says a lot, especially if you guys got small boys or girls who want to get into daddy's hobby. Yes, I definitely think you can have a good time with this. All right, guys.
Okay.
Well, we're going to now, and maybe we'll do this again as we get closer to launch or when we have something here to show. And if you have any questions, you have an idea. The spiral bound idea was a customer. He asked us if we can make it an add-on goal. And you know what? It never even crossed our minds. And there it is. So we all listening to you. Thank you and good night.
All right. Thanks. Good night, guys.